Have you ever stepped into your backyard expecting to hear birdsong, only to find complete silence? Just seconds ago, your garden sounded alive. Sparrows were chattering, cardinals were calling from the trees. A robin was singing somewhere beyond the fence. Then you opened the door. Everything stopped. Most people assume they frightened the birds away. They shrug, scatter a handful of seed, and wait for the songs to return. But what if that silence wasn't fear? What if it was something far more deliberate? Because according to researchers who study bird behavior, silence is often one of the most sophisticated forms of communication birds possess. It can spread through an entire backyard in seconds, without a single bird ever making a dramatic escape. And here's the unsettling part. Many times, they're not warning each other about a predator. They're evaluating you before a single bird decides whether to sing again, fly closer, or land at your feeder. An invisible process has already begun. Every movement you make, the speed of your footsteps, the direction of your eyes, even the way you pause near the feeder, becomes information. Information they've been collecting for weeks, perhaps even months. The birds in your yard may know far more about your habits than you've ever imagined. And once you understand what that sudden silence really means, you'll never hear a quiet backyard the same way again. The first thing to understand is that birds don't treat every sound or every person the same way. To us, a quiet backyard feels empty. To a bird, it's often the beginning of a decision. Long before wings take off or songs disappear, birds enter what behavioral scientists describe as a period of heightened vigilance. Instead of reacting instantly, they pause, they watch. They compare what they're seeing against everything they've learned from previous encounters. Imagine a chickadee perched on a nearby branch. It notices your back door opening. It sees the familiar shape of your body. Then it waits. Not because it has forgotten who you are, but because it is asking a remarkably important question. Is today going to be the same as yesterday? Wild birds survive by recognizing patterns, not by taking chances. Every encounter becomes another piece of evidence added to an internal record. If your movements have always been calm, predictable, and non-threatening, that record works in your favor. But birds don't assume consistency. They verify it. That brief silence you hear is often the moment when dozens of tiny observations happen all at once. How quickly are you walking? Are you looking directly at them? Are you carrying something unusual? Did you stop in a different place today? Each detail matters. Only after those questions are answered does the backyard begin to breathe again. One bird chirps, another answers from a nearby tree. A finch returns to the feeder. The songs didn't simply come back. They returned because, once again, you passed the test. If you've ever watched birds closely, you've probably noticed something curious. When one bird flies away, another often stays exactly where it is. Not singing, not feeding, just watching. Most people assume that bird is simply being cautious. But researchers studying backyard species have found that many birds assign different roles within a flock while feeding. Some individuals continue searching for food, while others temporarily act as sentinels, remaining alert for anything unusual in the environment. That silent bird on the highest branch may not be hiding. It may be gathering information. Its eyes aren't simply looking at you. They're measuring your behavior. Birds pay attention to surprisingly small details. They notice whether you stop beside the feeder or walk straight past it. They recognize whether your hands are empty or carrying unfamiliar objects. Even the direction of your gaze can influence how quickly they decide it's safe to continue feeding. To a bird, these aren't random movements. They're clues. Every clue helps answer one critical question. Has anything changed? Because in the wild, change often means danger. A familiar human behaving in an unfamiliar way can trigger more caution than a stranger seen from a distance. The bird isn't reacting to who you are alone. It is reacting to whether your behavior still matches the pattern stored in its memory. And that's why the quiet observer often remains until the very last moment. Only when that single bird decides nothing is wrong does the invisible message spread across the yard. Almost instantly, the tension dissolves. A sparrow drops onto the feeder. A robin resumes its song. A cardinal emerges from the shrubs. To us, it feels as though the backyard suddenly came back to life. But to the birds, it was never silent. It was simply waiting for one final decision. Here's where everything changes. The birds visiting your backyard aren't judging you based on one encounter. They're judging you based on hundreds. Every morning you stepped outside with a cup of coffee. Every time you quietly refilled the feeder. Every afternoon you walked across the lawn. Without realizing it, you were giving them new information. Researchers studying bird cognition have discovered that many backyard birds don't simply remember isolated events. They build long-term patterns, allowing them to predict what is likely to happen next. Imagine each encounter becoming another page in an invisible notebook. If you always approach the feeder slowly, that pattern grows stronger. If one morning you suddenly rush across the yard or make an unexpected movement, the pattern changes and the birds notice immediately. This is why trust is never built in a single day. One handful of seed doesn't earn it. One peaceful visit isn't enough. Wild birds trust what happens repeatedly. Day after day, they compare today's behavior with yesterday's. When those patterns remain consistent, something remarkable happens. Your presence no longer feels uncertain. It becomes predictable, and for a wild bird, living in a world where every mistake could be its last, predictability is one of the strongest reasons to stay instead of flying away. Now imagine you're away from home for an entire week. The bird feeder stays full, but no one opens the back door. No familiar footsteps cross the deck. No quiet morning routine unfolds. To you, it's just a vacation. To the birds, something unexpected has changed. At first, they continue arriving at their usual time. They perch in the same branches, waiting for the familiar sequence they've learned so well. But nothing happens. The prediction fails. The next morning, they return again. Still nothing. Slowly, they begin spending more time searching elsewhere, not because they've forgotten your yard, but because wild birds cannot afford to rely on an uncertain food source. Every minute and every flight costs precious energy. Yet something remarkable happens when you finally come home. Often within a day, the familiar visitors begin to reappear. The songs return. The feeder becomes busy again. It's as though someone quietly restarted an invisible clock. Why? Because the memory was never erased. It was simply waiting for confirmation. The birds didn't abandon your backyard. They adjusted their expectations until the pattern returned. That reveals something extraordinary about how they see the world. They don't just remember where food is. They remember who makes that place reliable. And once that trust has been earned through weeks or months of consistency, it doesn't disappear overnight. It simply waits, just as patiently as the birds themselves. Perhaps that's the biggest surprise of all. Most of us believe we're the ones observing birds. We choose the feeder, fill it with seed, and quietly watch from the window as they come and go. But every morning, another story is unfolding. While you're watching them, they're watching you. They've learned your routine, recognized your movements, and quietly decided whether you're someone they can trust. Not because they understand you the way another person would, but because your actions have become predictable. In the world of a wild bird, predictability means safety, and safety is everything. The next time your backyard falls silent as you step outside, don't assume you've ruined the moment. The birds may simply be doing what they've always done, checking that you're still the same person they remember. A few quiet seconds later, the songs begin again. Not by accident, but because, once again, you've proven yourself worthy of their trust. The next time you open your back door, don't rush. Pause for just a moment. Listen. Look beyond the feeder, beyond the branches, beyond the birds that are easy to see. Somewhere nearby, one bird is almost certainly watching before it moves. It isn't wondering whether food is there. It's deciding whether you are exactly who it expected to find. That decision has been built over countless ordinary mornings, moments you probably don't even remember, but the birds never completely forgot. Perhaps that's the real wonder of sharing a backyard with wild birds. Trust isn't created through words. It isn't earned in a single afternoon. It's built quietly, one predictable morning at a time, until your presence becomes part of their world. And maybe that's why the most meaningful relationships with wildlife are often the ones we never realize we're creating. So, have you ever noticed birds waiting before you stepped outside, or staying calm while they flew from everyone else? Share your experience in the comments. I read every story, and your observation might help explain behavior someone else has never noticed. If this video changed the way you see the birds in your backyard, subscribe to Backyard Bird World. Every week, we'll uncover another hidden behavior that has been happening right outside your window all along.